Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out! Here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud. He's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there! There goes the Spider-Man. So, welcome to the Lunar Observer.
We didn't put the intro into the script, did we?
No, we didn't.
Do you remember it?
I can wing it.
Well, I remember it. Welcome to the Lunar Observer, the unscheduled podcast. Nope, I can't remember it either. Welcome to the Lunar Observer, the unscheduled podcast about fans discussing Insomniac games, the creators of Spyro the Dragon, Ratchet & Clank, and Resistance. I'm Kebabs, and joining me today, as usual, is Division 10. Here we go!
Woo! So we're changing up the format a little bit here. We are going to stick to shorter, more regular episodes. So this unscheduled podcast might just turn weekly.
No, I don't.
No?
I disagree.
Okay.
No, it's not meant to be weekly because, you know, Insomniac news doesn't happen every week.
I know, but we have so much stuff to cover, so I think...
Yeah, we do. We have, the last episode, typical for the Lunar Observer, really. The last episode was just before a game comes out, and then you'd expect us to cover the game coming out and the reviews. But there's a problem with that, which is that we are busy kind of playing the game.
Well, there's that, and then there's also the issue of we're not getting it at the same time.
No, so, yeah. Obviously, today's episode we will be discussing the Insomniac Spider-Man game that is exclusive to PlayStation 4, but obviously we have a lot of other topics to talk about as well, chief among which is the release of the Ratchet & Clank game and the reception of the movie, but we'll cover that in a later episode. For now, it's about Spider-Man because that is the news of the day.
Yeah, it is, and I am super psyched because for the first time since joining the Lunar Observer, I know more about something Insomniac related than Kebabs does.
Yeah. Ratchet and Clank were on even ground, but it's kind of a running joke for me that all of my co-hosts on the show don't know a thing about Spyro the Dragon because they're like, oh, I just never played it. Shrug. And I'm like, how can you not have played Spyro? Anyway, on the subject of Spider-Man, I thought I would begin by reading out the official description for Spider-Man PS4 brackets working title from the actual game page on the Insomniac website. So, here we go. Starring the world's most iconic superhero, Spider-Man PS4 working title, although I think the most iconic superhero is actually Superman, but anyway, Spider-Man's pretty up there. It features the acrobatic abilities, improvisation, and web slinging that the Wallcrawler is famous for, while also introducing elements never before seen in a Spider-Man game. I can only assume that means cleaning up your webs after you're done with them.
or being berated by Aunt May when you come home late.
Or J. Jonah Jameson for existing. From traversing with parkour and utilizing the environment to new combat and blockbuster set pieces, it's Spider-Man unlike any you've played before. Marvel and Insomniac Games have teamed up to create a brand new and authentic Spider-Man story. This isn't the Spider-Man you've met before or seen in a movie. This is an experienced Peter Parker who's more masterful at fighting big crime in New York City. At the same time, he's struggling to balance his chaotic personal life and career with the fate of 9 million New Yorkers rests upon his shoulders.
That sounds heavy and difficult.
It doesn't seem, just from the looks of it, like the look of his suit, it still feels a little bit handcrafted. It's not like super high tech like Iron Man helped him design it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not like the Marvel Universe suit.
Yeah, because at the moment in the comics, isn't Peter Parker like, he's actually got a budget now, and he has like a company, and he has like a super advanced Spider-Man suit now.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Spider-Man, and this is going to come back to New Universe issues, is there's multiple issues in the Marvel Universe. So, putting my little Marvel hat on here. For anybody who's familiar with Spider-Man even at a glance, you might have seen, say, this female version walking around with a black and white suit and green and blue shoes. That's Spider-Gwen. That's that she's never met Peter Parker, except for one crossover event. They all take place in separate universes. So the primary one that we're dealing with right now is an adult Spider-Man. There's another one called Spider-Man Renew Your Vows, where he's a father with a child. There's a Spider-Man version that they've actually just brought over from the main universe because there's been this whole world-shattering event called Secret Wars. Again, I'm not gonna bore you guys with the details unless you want me to, but Spider-Man.
No, I think most fans are generally aware that DC and Marvel have multiple universes and versions of their characters.
Yeah, but I think what sets apart Marvel from DC as far as universes go is that these universes operate independently of one another and yet are aware of one another.
Whereas DC, it's more like, we're using a new universe as an excuse to start from the top.
Yeah, Marvel doesn't do that. When they merge or separate universes, each of those universes, unless it's destroyed completely, which is sort of a way of clearing things out, but
the Ultimate Universe.
Yeah, like Ultimate Universe, but Ultimate Spider-Man Sade, he was actually, his chunk of the universe was brought over into Secret Wars, into Battle World, and continued on after that story ended. So, these universes in Marvel have always existed separately. You know, the 616 is the one that most people are familiar with, but there's a lot of others.
Yeah.
But anyway...
The point being...
MCU is its own universe. This game is going to be its own universe. And it looks like that this is an older Spider-Man who is a little bit smarter, as the game description says, but isn't on the level of having assistance from Tony Stark, i.e. the Spider-Man suit from MCU, or old enough to have his own company, i.e. the new comic Spider-Man.
Yeah, if I were to use a point of comparison, we are obviously past Spider-Man 1. I'm using the Raimi films as a point of comparison. We are obviously past the point of Spider-Man 1, which is the origin story. We are obviously past that. I also think we are past Spider-Man 2, because there's still a little bit of inexperience and still learning the ropes in a Spider-Man 2 phase, his second adventure. I would say, in terms of his career, we are more in Spider-Man 3, where he is very well versed in what he's doing. Which is an interesting way of doing it, because an origin story, as repetitive as it would be, from a gameplay perspective, it is perfect for having Spider-Man learn new powers and expanding the breadth of the gameplay that he has. By setting it, at an experienced point of his career, you limit your options to do that, unless Spider-Man's like, wow, I'm getting a lot of these powers now recently.
Another way they could do it is the in media res, where you get your powers through flashbacks, and or there's Marvel Universe is huge. There's a number of supervillains, not just Spider-Man, but pretty much all over, and they sort of cross over and around and into each other, that could maybe temporarily take his powers away.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's a bit of a
he is
cop-out,
an inventor, so it could be that throughout the adventure he would pick up equipment that would help him expand his web abilities and the way to use that fluid that he created.
Yeah, see, that's another interesting thing. It depends on the version of Spider-Man. Sometimes he has web shooters that he's either designed himself or designed with Stark. But some versions of him, he actually shoots the webs himself.
Like a spider, which is something that the Raimi films popularized.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see, is this going to be an all-tech Spider-Man, where over the course of the game you actually invent as Spider-Man and build new gadgets for him, and the only quote-unquote superpowers he actually has are his disproportionate strength of a spider as well as his spider sense? I think if they're going to go that route, that's how they're going to do it, is that he has those two powers to start, plus his web slingers in a basic version. And over the course of the game, you might have him stop and invent things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Infamous had the point of comparison and arguably the best superhero games outside of the Batman games, obviously the Arkham Saga, would be Infamous, and that actually had a very, very good power progression system, because periodically throughout the story, Cole, the main character of the first two Infamous games, is Cole McGrath, who has powers of electricity, and his abilities are expanded when he goes to certain power transformers, which he does periodically through story points, and that's where he picks up big powers like the ability to summon lightning bolts like from the sky, or being able to use the power of magnetism to propel him along metal cables and stuff like that. But at the same time, he can spend his XP to improve and buff his minor powers as well. So I would imagine something like that. Again, I would think that maybe Peter would pick up pieces of technology that he can then use to unlock abilities and stuff like that. Maybe. Like, let's say that there's a mission where he goes into Oscorp HQ and he picks up a piece of Oscorp technology that, hey, I can reuse this. And then all of a sudden we have the ability to make web domes that protect you in battle for one hit. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see him picking up Oscorp. I could see him picking up maybe some of the Lizard's tech. A big thread of a lot of Spider-Man villains are that they themselves are scientists. So I could see him picking up and using their scientific technology to augment his own. And in some cases, he even helped some of those people build their own tech, so...
Yeah. Probably the most striking thing about Spider-Man in the trailer is the design of his suit, which, it's very traditional, except for the addition of the white spider on the front and the back, as well as around the white accents around his hands, which has pretty much split the fan base 50-50 as to whether it looks good or whether it's a horrible thing that should be turned black.
Yeah, I mean, it's very reminiscent of the new the new logo for the Sony Spider-Man films. Mm-hmm. And I think it's Sony's way of reminding you, hey guys, we still own Spider-Man, not Marvel.
Yeah, but at the same time, the general look of the suit, and in particular the segmented design of the eyepieces that can actually contract, reminds one very much of the Spider-Man that was just introduced in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as played by Tom Holland.
Yeah, which is interesting because in the TV show, all the animated TV shows that have occurred, the 1990s one, like the opening song I sang, as well as the more recent Disney XD one, his eyes contract and expand like that, as well as in the comics. So
yeah, that is obviously something that you can do in animation and to a certain extent in the comics. Probably the most famous use of this expressive masks is Robin from Teen Titans.
Yeah, so Robin does it too, but again, that's very hard to do in a live action movie. So the way that they did it in the most recent Spider-Man was CG. The way that they did it in Deadpool was actually multiple masks with CG added on over.
And I will say that as iconic as Spider-Man's design is, the limiting factor is the same as Batman and Iron Man, which is the fact that by virtue of the fact that they're wearing a face mask, you can't actually see their expression. So if you're in a really tense situation where Parker is only barely managing to scrape it together and make it through, you can't see that with the strained and worried look on his face. You just have the same expression as always on the face.
Yeah, no. Again, the way that the comics managed to do it is, the little spider sense visuals, or like thought bubbles, or just the expressiveness of the eyes and being able to expand and contract them. So, Insomniac taking that route makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I did hear, I forget where, apparently there is actually a story-based reason for why the spiders on his suit are white rather than the traditional black that you would expect.
Well, for one, this is a new universe, so...
Well, yes, of course, you would expect a different design, but the fact that it's white for a story-specific reason, I think that might actually tie into the fact that this is a more experienced Parker, which suggests that, he's been he's been through a few things, and I actually have a theory which would be really it would make a lot of sense if it were to be included. I think that the spider is white because at this point in Spider-Man's career, damn it, I forgot her name. Gwen is already dead. Gwen Stacy. And she is very well known for wearing white, either as Spider-Gwen or with her, that coat that she's always associated with wearing. So I'm thinking that Spider-Man has turned his spider white in honor of, her death and that sort of thing.
I mean, I'm interested to see why it's white, or it could just be, hey, that's what he had on hand. There's very little black in his suit.
It could just be like, Spider-Man, why is your spider white? It's my favorite color, dude.
Exactly.
So the trailer was probably the biggest surprise out of the Sony conference at E3. Second for me, only to the Crash Bandicoot announcement that they're doing the remakes, but this isn't a Naughty Dog show, so we won't go into that. It was runner-up in IGN's Best E3 2016 Trailer Award, coming second to Death Stranding, that Hideo Kojima game about
babies and oil.
Umbilical cords and dead crabs. But it did clinch the win for biggest surprise. Ironically enough, the runner-up in that category was Death Stranding again.
But seriously, leading up to E3, I think the big thing was like, Sucker Punch is making a Spider-Man movie. Sucker Punch is making but now what is Sucker Punch making, since they didn't announce anything?
Well, they wouldn't be making a Spider-Man movie because that's not their expertise. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, Sucker Punch doing it would make a lot of sense because they have, since 2009, their pedigree has been superhero games. And Infamous, while it doesn't have web slinging, it does have a focus on traversal and parkour. You can climb up buildings by climbing up the windowsills, stuff like that.
Yeah, and so my reply to anybody's like, oh no, Insomniac is making it. They're Ratchet and Clank. They're shooters. I'm like, have you never played Sunset Overdrive?
Yes. Well, in terms of tone, Sunset Overdrive doesn't exactly correlate to Spider-Man unless you're going for that ridiculous cartoon series. But one of the things that Sunset Overdrive was lauded for was its traversal mechanics, where it was grinding, yes, but you could grind and bounce and make your way from one end of the city to the next without ever having to touch the ground if you knew what you were doing. So that plays in very well with what Spider-Man does, and you can see that in the trailer where the way he swings, you can feel Spider-Man sort of tensing his muscles and, getting the weight in so that he can actually swing properly on his webs as he flings around the city.
Yeah, so the web swinging mechanic, I could see them reusing, say, some of the hook shot, swing shot mechanics from Ratchet and Clank, at least as a base in understanding.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think the swing shot is a good comparison unless you're talking about the, even not then with the swing ones, because you were locked on a certain plane. The swing shots in RC16 are very limited compared to on PS3 and PS2 because you can't actually change the direction Ratchet's swinging. It's always a set direction. You can't swing from side to side.
No, you can't, but
like
Insomniac has shown that they can do it. I have a feeling that the RC16 fixed swing mechanic, it was more for, anti-frustration techniques than anything else. Because in all the cases where you needed the swing shot, there was nowhere to swing side to side. There was no need for it. So swinging side to side would only drop you
that
a
was
cliff.
also not the case in the old games either. I mean, we'll get into this in the Ratchet and Clank episode, but I had big problems with RC16 and the invisible hand of Insomniac forcing the players to do what they wanted rather than what the players wanted. But anyway, I haven't really played any Spider-Man games, so I'm not the expert on this. The closest is a demo disc which had a demo for the PS1 game just titled Spider-Man, and that was pretty cool, so that was a good base. But the gold standard is Spider-Man 2, which was lauded for having an open world New York, which, Insomniac have proved that they can do very well designed open world areas with Sunset City, and realistic web placement. Spider-Man 2 was the first Spider-Man game where Spider-Man didn't actually shoot his web up into the sky. You actually had to shoot it onto a building, or else he would fall to your death.
Yes, you had to attach it to something, and every building had the ability to be attached to on pretty much every level, because you could go up and down too.
Yeah, in addition to that, the open world sections had, the open world of New York had side missions that you could do. And yeah, the game has been, it's the gold standard for Spider-Man games, but it hasn't really been matched. For whatever reason, every developer has either completely ignored it or tried to do it, and yet the execution just wasn't as good as it used to be.
I wonder why. I think part of the issue was something that was mentioned in a recent interview, is that those games, or just Spider-Man or Marvel games in general, tended to be pushed out around the time of a movie.
Yeah, like the Amazing Spider-Man games 1 and 2. The game for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie, aside from mobile games, was the last Spider-Man game before this one.
Yeah,
the last good game was Shattered Dimensions. Although I will say, honorable mention should go to Lego Marvel Superheroes, which I have played, and yeah, while it doesn't feature realistic webs, Spider-Man is actually one of the most fun characters to play as.
Yeah, I have to say, I own that game, and I haven't really had a chance to sit down with it very much, but I did really enjoy playing as Spidey.
Yeah. Which is a fun thing. I actually have a pet name for the Spider-Man game. It's a working title, but I call it Spidey.
With IG in the center.
Yeah, exactly. Until we get an actual name. I don't know. My proposed subtitle is Spider-Man, Lunar Arachnid.
Except that all the gameplay we saw was during the daytime.
So he gains the power of the moon. He gets blessed by Sailor Moon, and he has double strength at night, assuming there's no clouds. There we go. There you go, Sony. Free one for you there.
But the issue that I'd mentioned before is that a lot of the times these superhero games used to get tied specifically to a movie coming out, and then you have the problem of rush deadlines and, all the typical issues of a licensed franchise movie, which, incidentally, the Ratchet & Clank game avoided, even though it's a licensed movie of its own, a licensed game of its own game. But
correct, but that's because Insomniac is a very experienced developer. I mean, by the time RC16 was made, Insomniac was over 20 years old at that point. With the Spider-Man games, it was often like Activision saying, we need a Spider-Man game because we can't just sit on this license forever, and they just give it to some developer who has never made a Spider-Man game before and probably didn't have the budget or the resources or the experience to make it, and then you just have these awkward, okay-ish, but not really all that good Spider-Man games coming out year after year.
Yeah, because again, they're trying to tie to a specific deadline. Now, by the Spider-Man game that Insomniac is making, not tied to the Spider-Man Homecoming movie that's coming out, and they've made this clear.
In terms of the universe, although I do think that the feeling is that it's going to be released in 2017 alongside Homecoming, just to have the parallel thing, to give it the extra, so that they signal boost off of each other, which is pretty much what RC16 did. So there is a little bit of a tie-in there. But yeah, this is very much a sign of Activision being much more mindful and tailored about the games that they make, because they haven't really had Sony. Well, Marvel is dishing out the license, remember?
Yeah, that is true.
Notice how there hasn't been a game for a Marvel Cinematic Universe property since Thor.
Yeah, they've moved their
Well,
movie
except for the
tie-ins.
Lego games, obviously.
Yeah, they've moved their movie tie-ins to mobile, and that's fine. If you want like a build Tony Stark Tower when Iron Man 16 comes out, sure. Like, it's a mobile game. It's got a short development cycle. It's a simple title. But
And most often, the movie tie-ins actually make their way into that Marvel Heroes Diablo game.
yeah, which I'm a huge fan of. I main Moon Knight.
Okay, well,
But
don't go on for an hour on it.
yeah, I'm not. But what I'm saying is that you can pull it into those free-to-play games. You can pull it into the mobile games. You can do events in main games if there's, say, a multiplayer element. We don't know if Spider-Man's going to have a multiplayer element. That would be interesting, where everybody could play as a different variant of Spider-Man in a giant universe, and then they have universe events.
I honestly hope it doesn't, personally.
I mean, I want it to be a first-person experience first. But if it did something like Uncharted, where it had sort of a multiplayer mode on the side, I'm not against that if it doesn't take away from the single-player game.
But it always does. Look it up your arsenal. It's short compared to going Commando by 5 planets or so, because development time and resources also had to be put into the multiplayer.
That's true.
I mean, that benefited the momentum of the story, but it was still shorter. There was less content for the single player, and for someone like me who doesn't play multiplayer games because I don't enjoy that sort of thing, it's like, okay, well, you're basically having an entire section of the game dedicated to making me not want to play it.
Games like Uncharted, though, were able to do it.
Yes, I know, but as good as the multiplayer is, and as good as I was at PSX last year at the multiplayer, I'm not going to play it. I've never played the Uncharted multiplayer at all, because I just didn't want to. I'm there for the single player. So, IGN did a pretty good in-depth rewind theater of the trailer, and they picked out a couple of cool Easter eggs. The first one, which was in that main shot of him swinging just after you realize Insomniac are making a Spider-Man game. There's a billboard on top of a building saying Osborn for mayor, which I believe ties into his more political moves that he's done in the comics from time to time.
It's almost been a running joke more than anything. He's never actually run for mayor as far as I remember, but there's been jokes about it. So it's more of an Easter egg than anything else. Unless in this universe he actually is running for mayor, which would be interesting.
Well, why else would you put a billboard up?
Yeah.
Some people have speculated, oh, that means Osborn's the big bad. I'm like, no, that just says he's running for mayor. That doesn't mean he's, it would be the villain if it says, Osborn, I'm going to plant bombs in your houses, ha 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 ha.
I mean...
Then that would suggest more villainous. To me, this is more like a background element thing.
Yeah, and we already actually have at least one confirmed villain in this game.
Correct, because the other thing that they picked up, I didn't because I'm a comic noob. The thugs that Peter goes up against are the inner demons from Mr. Negative's gang, a fairly recent addition to the comics. I'm just basing this off the Rewind Theater. I don't actually know what I'm talking about here. Adding to this, in the shot of that black SUV just sort of like bashing police cars aside with the explosion, in the background on the corner of the street there is a Feast Soup Kitchen, which is the Mr. Negative's positive persona's good deeds.
Yeah, it's one of his fronts, basically. So Mr. Negative is an interesting super villain in the Spider-Man universe. He's a fairly recent addition, as you said. He's a street-level villain, so Kingpin level, basically.
Yeah, he's not like Galactus at all.
No, but what he does is he doesn't really have any superpowers himself. He has sort of the power to inspire, to basically make other people stronger. So all of his underlings
similar
and
to
masks...
how who was that? Who was the villain of the what was it? I'm forgetting all of the important names in order to make this connection. The TV show starring the woman protagonist based on...
Oh, you're talking about the Purple Man.
Yeah,
From Jessica Jones. Yep.
Jessica
Kilgrave.
Jones, yes.
Yeah, you're talking about Kilgrave.
He wasn't superpowered, but he had the power of persuasion.
Yeah.
Similar to that.
Yeah, so he he doesn't have the power of persuasion so much as the power of inspiration.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I meant.
Yeah. No, but it's a similar superpower in that he doesn't have super strength, or he can't, like, rocket himself around buildings, but he can... Anybody he inspires becomes ridiculously strong, and what that allows you to do from a gameplay standpoint is have degrees of mook. Like, his underlings can be punched and kicked and thrown around a lot harder, and they're... I wouldn't call them immortal.
We saw that in the trailer.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them immortal, but they're a heck of a lot stronger than, say, your random thugger on the street.
Yeah, which kind of softens the blow on that one shot where Spider-Man just slams that guy on the ground and appears to break his neck.
Yeah, that wouldn't have actually broken his neck. Not if he were in one of the underlings.
Yeah, so instead of Mr. Negative, he can survive gunshots in leap tall buildings in a single bound. It's more Mr. Negative. He's really good at speeches. So going off of that onto the next one, I actually noticed in the trailer when I was going frame by frame that Spider-Man's mask is actually individually modeled with like a seam around the neck, which to me suggests that he'll be taking the mask on and off at certain points.
Yes!
So that would be cool. It would actually be funny if there was a side mission like the opening to the Spider-Man 2 movie where you have to deliver a pizza as Peter Parker, but the only way to complete the mission in time is to swing around as Spider-Man. But you have to switch back to Parker to deliver the pizza.
That would be interesting, doing missions where you have to swap between in order to get through. Like, swing around to get up to a building that you normally wouldn't be able to access, but then switch back to Peter Parker to, like, get inside because, you know, he's a reporter, so he should be able to get in.
Yeah, that would actually be an interesting way for Peter to, say, get through certain missions undetected. Like, say, let's say that he needed to get to a building as Spider-Man where, say, Green Goblin has a bus full of children in it or whatever.
Yeah.
And except if the Green Goblin sees Spider-Man show up, he'll drop the bus. But as Parker, Spider-Man can actually get close to the Green Goblin by saying, "I'm a journalist, let me in."
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see non-Spider-Man gameplay in the Spider-Man game. And to make Peter Parker the journalist an interesting, you know, a skill, just like web slinging.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it shouldn't be the main focus of the game.
No.
I think Parker should be about 25%. It's sort of like the downtime between the big, exciting Spider-Man stuff, because ultimately, we're there to be Spider-Man, not Peter Parker.
Exactly, but
Peter Parker gives the groundedness and the depth to Spider-Man. That's why people want it there.
yeah.
The final thing on this Rewind Theater section is that, again, something that I noticed, in the shot where Spider-Man is swinging about the crane, I noticed that the crane is in fact in the process of lifting an Osborn sign onto a building, which to me suggests that, hey, maybe the Oscorp has recently purchased this building and is about to say, "We own this building," and then shenanigans happen.
Yeah. Alright. You're not as big into Spider-Man as I would say I am, and Spider-Man isn't even my main. I've been a Guardians of the Galaxy fan since Yondu was one of the main Guardians characters, not Star-Lord. But I do read my... Huh?
What year was that?
It's the 90s.
Okay.
Back when he didn't have a plastic prosthetic frill. But anyway, so... I do read Spider-Man, not nearly as much as maybe some of our listeners.
Listener.
Our two listeners. Hi, Viddy! Anyway, who would you want to see as a villain? If you could pick one Spider-Man, or even just one Marvel villain, because there is a lot of crossover between them. Like, I could absolutely see Kingpin, even though he's a Daredevil villain. primarily being in a Spider-Man game because it's still a crossover with New York City.
Well, again, I'm not as familiar with Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery, so as someone who isn't really invested in Spider-Man, except for having watched the movies a couple of times, I can only really answer what will sure make Spider-Man fans go, ugh, really? Answers of Green Goblin and Venom and Dr. Octopus. Basically, any of the villains that appeared in the movies are the ones that I'm familiar with and have seen, have been executed properly or show potential to. So I'm not as familiar about it. I mean, an idea for the story could be that I can't see any of the Spider-Man villains really putting up much of a threat to warrant the classic we're about to blow up Manhattan finale that you would expect out of a video game, unless the Spider-Man game is depicting the formation of the Sinister Six. A bunch of villains teaming up together, and together they provide a much bigger threat that, you fight them individually over the course of the game. They are formed in the middle of Act 2, and Act 3 is when everything goes crazy.
I mean, I could absolutely see this as a Sinister Six game. One of the interesting things about Spider-Man's villains is that they do end up working together. A lot of them aren't particularly powerful on their own. There's no Zod in the Spider-Man universe, in my personal opinion, unless you start going towards Galacticus, which in that case is really a Marvel-wide threat, not a Spider-Man
holy
threat.
Drop everything, get the villains to help us on this.
Yeah.
Sort of guy.
I personally, side tangent, I love how Squirrel Girl handles Galacticus.
Yeah, becomes friends.
Yeah.
Just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Bye.
Here's an entire planet of nuts. Eat.
Here's my Twitter handle.
But I mean, I could absolutely see it as a proper escalation. You start with some of the street level gangs. I mean, we've already got we already have evidence of that through the trailer. Maybe get Kingpin in there, and then start escalating into the weird. And a lot of, like I mentioned before, a lot of Spider-Man's villains have a science bent on them. So I would absolutely love to see something with Lizard, Doc Ock, of course, a Doc Ock fight. With all of the mechanical arms, just from a set piece standpoint, would be so cool if done properly.
A set piece that I thought of just now is a Green Goblin chase, where the Green Goblin is flying through Manhattan, obviously on his glider, and you have to chase him as Spider-Man, but of course you're limited to your webs, and you have to try and keep up whilst also dodging attacks, whilst also trying to deal damage.
I'm trying to remember if that's actually been done in a Spider-Man game. I actually played all of the PS2 ones because my brother did. I still own Spider-Man 2 somewhere.
The idea was sort of based off of what I remember from Spider-Man 3. I mean, the movie, obviously a terrible movie, but, just because it's bad doesn't mean it doesn't have potential. And I remember one of the moments was when Peter Parker's just sort of driving along on a scooter, and then Harry Osborn attacks him as the new Goblin, and there's a brief fight sequence where they fight each other in the air amongst the skyscrapers. It would be cool to have a gameplay sequence like that.
I mean, I think that's about all I can say for Spidey right now, given what we've seen.
I have one surprise topic that I intentionally deleted from your copy of what we were doing, which is the surprise little discussion topic, which is who will voice Spider-Man?
Oh God.
I mean, we've heard some voiceover. It sounds like
I think it's Yuri Lowenthal.
Who is one of the options. He is most well known in gaming spheres for voicing the Prince of Persia in Sands of Time, The Two Thrones, and The Forgotten Sands. And he also voiced Spider-Man in the mobile Amazing Spider-Man games for the movies.
I mean, yeah, I can't place that actor. I wish I could.
I will say it does sound like Yuri Lowenthal.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but...
Yeah. Okay, so first option, and obviously, and the most unlikely, is Tom Holland himself, who plays Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War, and he also recorded unique dialogue for Lego Marvel Avengers.
Considering that they explicitly said that this isn't based on MCU, I mean,
Yeah,
they
exactly,
could have,
that was my
but I
thought
doubt
too.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, they want to separate it. Having the same voice is like, no, you're just going to confuse everybody.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be him.
Option number 2, Drake Bell, the guy from Drake and Josh, who actually voiced Spider-Man in Marvel Heroes and the recently deceased Disney Infinity.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him there as well. He's done quite a good job in both those situations. I didn't even realize it was Drake Bell until I looked it up. I thought it was the same actor who voices Spider-Man in the Disney XD show.
I don't know who that is.
I can Google it, because I actually don't remember either.
Pull the wiki, Kronk!
Alright. Oh, that is Drake Bell. Yeah, so it is the same guy.
Okay. Cool.
So, yeah, I
Alright.
could actually see him doing it again. I mean,
Yeah, especially if they want to tag a quote-unquote celebrity name onto it. And he is known to have done Spider-Man and he has experience. I don't know what his reaction is amongst the fan base. Is this going to be another reaction like when Cora's voice actor was announced? Bella
I would say
something.
I don't know. I don't know. Like I watch the show. I don't have Disney XD. I wait for it to come out on Netflix, and I sort of marathon it while I'm doing other things. It's a fun show, but it's definitely aimed at the more younger crowd. It doesn't have the nostalgia of the '90s show.
Yeah, which fits for Disney Infinity, but
Yeah.
the look of the Spider-Man game that Insomniac is going for is a little bit away from cartoony. It's almost heading towards a Resistance type of grit.
Yeah, it's gritty without being overtly so. Like it's not
Yeah.
it's not The Last of Us levels of gritty.
It's realistic, and it knows what New York looks like, which is often gritty.
Yeah. Having spent the first 20-something years of my life there, yeah, I mean, it's a slightly, slightly cartoony version of New York, but it's not a cartoon of New York.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Sunset City at all.
No.
The next option is, and this is someone who, funnily enough, I don't want voicing Spider-Man. It's actually James Arnold Taylor. No offense to James, but he has done the voice of Ratchet and Clank. Obviously, he is fantastic in that role. He also played Spider-Man in Lego Marvel Superheroes, sort of like the one before Lego Marvel Avengers, where Tom Holland did it. And I didn't like his performance as Spider-Man because it's James Arnold Taylor as Ratchet as Spider-Man. It's just a Ratchet voice.
It is. I mean, he is very good at doing voices. That is his thing, is impersonations. Like, he voiced... Huh?
Of course, he
Yeah.
did Obi-Wan Kenobi.
He did Obi-Wan Kenobi. He did, he voices... I think he exclusively voices for, gosh, I can't remember this actor's name, but he plays, Captain Jack Sparrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. He voices Johnny Depp when Johnny Depp is too expensive. So
Yeah,
like in Kingdom Hearts. Yeah.
Or when he's getting a little bit too embarrassed. Sorry, I'm screwing this up. For when he gets a little bit too far into reprising his Fear and Loathing role.
Yeah. So
When he's too busy doing another Alice in Wonderland sequel.
yeah. Well, the second one tanked, so I don't think they're getting a third one.
Well, that's irrelevant to the joke.
Sorry. When Johnny Depp is too busy or too expensive, James Arnold Taylor basically fills in for him. He's filled in for a lot of people, and he can do voices. So if he decides to do, instead of his voice, which is fine, but I mean, Insomniac already has his voice as him as Ratchet.
Yeah, the voice works extremely well for Peter Parker because the personalities and the relative age of Ratchet and Peter are very, very similar. You know, they're both teenagers who are rather impulsive and yet also incredibly resourceful. The problem is that as a Ratchet fan, it's really confusing for me. And off-putting in a way.
Yeah, but I mean that is kind of. But the thing is we're not playing as teenage Peter Parker as we know. We might be, maybe like a year or two after he's gained his powers. In which case, that kind of voice makes absolute sense. But I think whoever is the voiceover is probably already our Spidey. Now the question is, who is it?
Well, the last option that I have, and I think this is the most likely if it's not Yuri Lowenthal, and again, because it's the mobile games, I doubt that it's Yuri, so this is probably actually indeed the most likely. It's Sam Riegel, who played Spider-Man in the console Amazing Spider-Man games, and funnily enough, he also played Zircon Jr. in RC16 and Zed.
Huh. So he's got so that might be why they got him, because it's a different Mr. Zircon than the Zircon Jr. than the Into the Nexus Zircon Jr.
Yeah, and in my opinion, it wasn't as good or appealing, but you know, that's what voice directors are for.
Yeah. Neither here nor there, but the fact that they got him for not one but two roles in the games might say something for the Spider-Man game.
Yeah. I mean, Sam Riegel, I think, would make the most sense because he's the most recent one. He also would have done a lot of voice acting for Spider-Man through the two Amazing Spider-Man games, and you know, James Arnold Taylor would be a very strong pick for Insomniac simply because of the incredibly long heritage and familiarity they have with each other, by virtue of the fact that they've done Ratchet for nearly 15 years now. But I think Sam Riegel would be the better choice here.
It also means that two of Insomniac's flagship titles don't have the same sound to them. And that definitely did not sound like James Arnold Taylor in the trailer, unless he was masking his voice like he does for some of his impersonations.
Yeah. If that was James Arnold Taylor, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, my bigger issue is yours. Is not there's no knock against James himself. He's a great voice actor. It's that he'd be voicing a nearly identical sounding character as a lead in two of Insomniac's games.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like when Robert Downey Jr. played Sherlock Holmes. He wasn't playing Sherlock Holmes. He was playing Iron Man as Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, that's how I felt. And he's a very good actor, don't get me wrong, but he was playing a little bit too close to an existing character rather than...
Well, that's probably because he was typecast for the role.
Yeah.
And that's not really his fault. Outside of, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Anyway, I think that about wraps it up for the Spider-Man episode.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which is long enough to be a full episode, actually. Sorry about that.
Well, it was an hour, but yeah, I would agree. Whoever voiced him in the trailer, I like him.
Yeah,
I think
they did a very good job. They sounded very youthful, actually, which is funny because they're talking about an experienced Spider-Man, and yet he's still very clearly a young teenager who could almost be 15, 16 years old.
Except that you have, well, going back to James Arnold Taylor, he's what, 50? 40, maybe?
I have no idea what his age is,
yeah.
And I'm not rude enough to guess.
Well, I mean, he's been voiced, even if he was 15 when he started voicing Ratchet, which he wasn't, he'd have to be at minimum 30s at this point, and he still sounds like a 15-year-old.
Yeah, he is very good at de-aging himself from a vocal perspective.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like, actual people can still sound that young and still be in their 20s. I could actually see this Spider-Man as a 20-year-old who's running joke, constantly being mistaken for a teenager when he's Peter Parker. Hey,
yeah,
I
wouldn't
need
it be
ID.
funny if he... that would be funny for a mission where he thinks he can get into a nightclub that's with a party that's being, bankrolled by the Kingpin, so he thinks, okay, the best way I can get in here is basically to go in as Parker. And then he walks up and say, ID? Are you serious? I'm 18. Say, you look 12. Get out of here. And say, well, crap, I guess I have to go in as Spider-Man then. So, yeah, let's wrap up the show so that the audience can get on with their lives.
Yup. Thank you for
you can
listening.
find-
Oh,
Yeah, you can find us on various social medias. You are probably listening to this on our YouTube channel, which is the Lunar Observer Podcast. It's also the name of our Google Plus page. And if you want to follow us on Tumblr, it's also the Lunar Observer, no podcast at the end. And on Twitter, we are at lunar_observer, no the or podcast. So there you go.
yep. And Facebook. Nyeh.
Yeah, we don't really have a Facebook page.
Nope.
Really.
No
that-
book of faces. But on that note, thanks for tuning in. We're glad to be back, and
Yeah.
we'll see you shortly with our next topic, and we'll be covering other things like the recent release of Edge of Nowhere. We'll be covering Song of the Deep, which is coming out in just 3 short weeks, and we'll
Also, don't forget that Insomniac kind of announced 2 new VR titles that we need to talk about.
yeah, we'll be covering those new VR titles for the Oculus that it should be coming sometime in the fall.
The games, that is, not the episode. Although, don't be surprised.
And of course, we need to do our post-mortem on Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, both outputs. So,
Yeah.
Until next time, we'll see you then. Something or other. Keep observing. Yo.
Yep. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.